Welcome to Chabad Inspiration. Recently, I was fortunate to hear a Zoom farbrengen where the chief rabbi of Chabad and the Rebbe's emissary to the city of Antwerp, Belgium, was speaking, and he told a most powerful story. And I thought that the story that I heard from Rabbi Shabtai Slabetitsky on this Zoom session, since it touched me so much, I would share it with you, and you would have the inspiration and the courage and strength as well, which the story gives. So a heartfelt thank you to Rabbi Slabetitsky. He told the following story. Many years ago, the Chabad rabbi of Brussels, Belgium, wanted to come to the International Convention of Chabad Shluchim, which takes place once a year in 770 Eastern Parkway, Brooklyn, New York, to come celebrate with the one who sent them, the Rebbe, and celebrate with brothers from around the world under one roof with our loving Father. And he bought himself a ticket, but he heard that there was a very good price on a particular airline which was selling discounted tickets at a very bargain price, non-stop direct from Antwerp to New York. Anybody that ever traveled from Europe to New York knows, as they say, it's a pleasure to cross the pond non-stop. So he bought the ticket, but then shortly before the flight was going to take off, he was notified that this discounted airline is going out of business and the tickets are not valid and will not be honored. So he called his travel agent, who immediately arranged for him another ticket, except at this time, in his mind, it was a negative. He would be forced to make a stopover in London, England, at the airport, and then continue on to New York to come see the Rebbe at 770 Eastern Parkway. When they got to London, he was exhausted. They had some time. And what does a Lubavitcher do when he's in the airport and waiting for another flight? So he was walking around and looking, maybe perhaps he can help another Jew do the mitzvah of putting on tefillin. And as he was walking around, he was exhausted and tired. And suddenly he noticed that a gentleman got up from his seat. The airport was full. So he figured if this fellow finally got up and there's a seat available, he would sit down a little bit to rest. He sat down in the chair, and he noticed the gentleman next to him, well-dressed man reading the newspaper, focused on the stocks, where the newspaper reports all the stocks that go up and down and so on. And the fellow was very focused and immersed in his newspaper. He didn't want to disturb him. When he finished reading the paper and he put it down, this Chabad rabbi says to him, "Excuse me, sir, can you please tell me what time it is?" The fellow looks at his watch and he says, "Sure." The Chabad rabbi says to him, "That's a very nice watch there." And they began a conversation. As they continued, the rabbi says to this businessman, "Can I please offer you an opportunity to fulfill the mitzvah of putting on tefillin?" He wasn't sure if this fellow was Jewish, but he figured there's nothing to lose. If he wouldn't know what tefillin is, he got his answer. And the fellow says, "Thank you very much for the kind offer, but I put on tefillin this morning." Chabad rabbi says, "Well, you know, Chabad Lubavitch has a custom. We put on 2 pairs of tefillin every day, even bar mitzvah boys, because Rashi and his grandson Rabbeinu Tam had a disagreement of the 4 sections that go onto the headpiece of the tefillin. How do you arrange them? So we put on both versions, the Rashi set and the Rabbeinu Tam set. Perhaps you would like to put on a 2nd pair of tefillin." Just checking, maybe after all he would agree to put on tefillin politely. Fellow says, "Thank you very much. I put on 2 pairs of tefillin today." Then the fellow says to this rabbi, "Tell me something. You're a Lubavitcher, right?" He says, "Yes." That piqued the interest of Chabad rabbi. How does this fellow know who I am? In a London airport. And he says, "Do you have any connection to Lubavitch? Do you know the Rebbe?" He says, "Do I know the Rebbe? I live with the Rebbe every day. He's with me every day." He says, "Really? Can you please share your story?" He says, "Sure." He says, "You see, I am a Holocaust survivor. And as a young child, I was taken by the Nazis to the concentration camps, and after what I saw there, I never went back to Jewish practice. I went to New York. I established a business after the war. I was quite successful. And then he hit a bump in the road, and somebody told him, you're in New York, why don't you go over to the Lubavitcher Rebbe and receive a blessing? The Rebbe can give you advice, give you encouragement, and give you a bracha, a blessing. He booked an appointment, Yechidus, a private audience with the Rebbe at 770 Eastern Parkway, waited his turn, took a long time to book the appointment, to receive the appointment, waited that night for the Yechidus for many hours, and finally his turn arrived. He goes into the Rebbe and he tells the Rebbe why he's here, and he's asking for a blessing. The Rebbe listened to him very carefully, attentively, gave him advice, instructions, and of course a bracha and a blessing. Then the Rebbe says to him, so are you amongst those that go out and share the beauty of Judaism and spread Yiddishkeit wherever you are? He says to the Rebbe, no, I'm sorry, I'm not one of those. The Rebbe says to him, why not? He says, Rebbe, let me tell you my story. I was a little boy when the Nazis came and they rounded him up. And they took him, together with his father, and they put him on those infamous cattle cars to the concentration camps. They arrived to the camps. They were given this set of pajamas to wear, like all the Jewish inmates. They suffered. They worked hard, long days in the heat, in the cold. Their bodies grew thinner and thinner, with less and less food to eat and less water to drink. Survival was not so simple. Sadly, not everybody made it, as we see from the pictures, and we all heard the stories from countless individuals that heard it from either the survivors or read the stories, etc. He says, my father and I miraculously ended up sleeping in the same barrack amongst 800 Jews. We had 2 spots on the same bed. He was referring to those shelves where you see the pictures where the Nazis put up in the barracks where Jews slept like sardines. A number of Jews, 7, 8 Jews in one shelf, in one bed. And his father and him lay side by side. He says one night his father came home to the barrack after a day of work. And he looks at his young boy and he says, you look very pale. You don't look healthy. Please take my ration of bread and eat it. The boy took one look at his father and he saw his father is starving. He didn't look very healthy either. And the boy says to his father, Tate, ich kenn nicht. My father, I'm sorry, I can't take your bread. What are you going to live from? After realizing that the boy is not going to take it, the father puts down the slice of bread on the bed and he walks out of the barrack. The boy was so hungry. Hunger overtook him and he ate his bread as well as his father's piece of bread. They went to sleep. At the crack of dawn, the Nazis, Yimach Shmom, arrived. The Nazis came like dogs, barking. Get up! Work! They gave you only a limited amount of time to get out of your bed, so to speak, and get dressed and be ready to leave the barrack. And everybody is rushing except his father, who's deep asleep. The boy realized that his father didn't get up yet. He's trying to wake his father to please wake up because he can be in trouble if he continues sleeping. There's no answer. Eventually the boy tries to gently touch his father's hand to wake him. And he realizes there's no life in that hand. There's no movement. His father's gone. He says to the Rebbe, how can I, a Jew, who I believe, he said, I caused my own father's death. I took his piece of bread. I am a criminal. I'm a murderer. I stopped following Yiddishkeit a long time ago. And you're asking me, Rebbe, if I walk around inspiring others to keep Yiddishkeit? I don't do it myself. The Rebbe listened very carefully. The Rebbe unfortunately lost a brother who was murdered by the Nazis, a sister-in-law and a brother-in-law who went to the gas chambers in Treblinka. The Rebbe knows the pain of the Holocaust firsthand. And the Rebbe says to him, I hear your pain, but let me ask you a question. What was Hitler looking to do? Was he just on a simple killing spree, randomly, or was focused? He says, of course, he was looking for Jews. So the Rebbe says he wasn't just looking to kill bodies. He was looking to kill the Jewish soul. Because if it was just bodies, he could have killed anybody. But he unfortunately collected 6 million Jews and killed them. And many more that he wished he could have killed. He said, if that's the case, Hitler knows that inside of you there is a body, but there's also a neshama, there is a soul. And he was after your soul. And your soul and your neshama has faith and a love for our Father in heaven. Just like God has love to you as God's only son, God's only child, which is the love that God has to every Jew. You too have a love to your Father in heaven. And if you're telling me that he eradicated your soul, if he extinguished the light of Jewishness in your heart, then you tell me who won, you or Hitler. The fellow began to cry. The Rebbe looks him in the eyes. The Rebbe gives him a hand. And the Rebbe says to him, take my hand. Let's join together. And join me in bringing the beauty and the light of Yiddishkeit to all corners of the world. This way you will be alive and you will defeat Hitler with every good deed that you do. He says the Rebbe's message brought me back to life, brought me back to Yiddishkeit and to Judaism. And ever since then, I too, whenever I have a chance, help my fellow Jews love our Father in heaven and participate and celebrate the beauty of Jewish heritage and Jewish tradition, which is over 3,300 years old. And I make sure that the candle of Yiddishkeit continues to shine brightly. So you're asking me, says this fellow to the Shliach of Brussels, though I know the Rebbe is with me every day, all the time. A powerful story, and a story that has so much meaning. But just allow me to say a simple thought. Sometimes all of us underestimate who we are. We look at ourselves as just a small Jew, one individual person. So what difference does it really make? But as the Rebbe answered in a famous letter to a Jew of Curaçao, one of the islands in the Caribbean, who wrote to the Rebbe and he signed a small Jew on an island. And the Rebbe writes back, I take issue with the fact there is no such thing as a small Jew, because every Jew is a descendant, a child of our forefathers, Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yankov, and our mothers, Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, and Leah. When we realize how powerful we are, when we realize how cherished and loved we are, when we realize how powerful our life is and what it represents, and most importantly, what we can accomplish and achieve, that quite literally, we can tip the scales of the entire world and the entire history and bring about redemption. We can bring the medicine that the world is so desperately looking for. You're watching a generation of young children, of young adults that have no idea where they are. They have no clue why they are here. They're not sure what their identity is. And they're willing to try and do anything. But in essence, it's only a cry of a child saying, help me, I'm lost. And all of us have the gift of Torah Tzivolanu Moshe Meirasha Kilas Yaakov. We are sitting on the inheritance, the book that has all the answers. And when we read the Rebbe's teachings, we don't just have the answers, we actually have the roadmap, the guide of how to implement those answers. Let us inspire ourselves to see ourselves the way God looks at us. Not the way we look at ourselves sometimes, but sometimes it's important to realize, let us not just underestimate and undervalue who we are. Not because we're arrogant, but because our Father in heaven loves us, and to Him it's so meaningful, and that we're talking about God Himself. So indeed your life is extremely meaningful. In fact, if an infinite God loves you, then you are infinitely meaningful. When we take this message and we share it with everybody, regardless of race, color, and creed, that everybody has at Tzelem Elokim, everybody is created in the image of God, and every human life really makes a difference in the vast plan of creation. And no human being is extra. There's no pawn on the chessboard that is here accidentally. Every soldier on the chessboard has a precise location, a precise meaning, a very specific mission to defend the fort and to go on the attack and conquer the enemy. Every single one of us defends our fort and goes out and conquers the enemy, the darkness and the pain of gullus, of exile. And every single one of us has the power to come to the finish line, to cross over into the end zone and win the game, but not just for ourselves, for all of humanity. And as the Rebbe says, when you have a scale that goes up and down, and your side goes down because you're the one that weighs more, then in a sense what you're doing is you're not just outweighing the other side, but on the contrary, you're uplifting the other side because you go down, and now you're bringing everybody else up. That power is empowered to every single person who walks the face of planet Earth. Let us share with the world the Rebbe's message of strength, of courage, of importance. And together we will merit to see the great day that Maimonides foretells, the day of Mashiach's coming, which will include all those that were murdered and killed and gunned down in Jewish persecutions, will come back to life. And you will be able to say, and together we will each say, look at what I have achieved, because those good deeds are the partners which brought about the coming of Mashiach, and perhaps it was even the last final brick and the last good deed which was done in exile and actually tipped the scale, as Rambam writes, and the Rebbe quotes so often the teachings of Maimonides, that one good deed can tip the scale for all of humanity, and we will merit to see a world of peace and harmony, a world redeemed from its pain, its illness, its sickness, and its suffering, with the coming of We Want Mashiach Now. Thank you very much for joining. L'chaim.